we invite you to the world of unique European architecture. We present to your attention three of the most mysterious cathedrals of old Europe. Breath of eternity. There are places where time itself seems to slow down and space begins to speak the language of stone and light. When you find yourself on the banks of the Rhine, even from a distance, your gaze is drawn to two dark silhouettes that rise unstoppably, cutting through the clouds with their sharp spires. This is not just a structure rising above the roofs of the old city. It is a dream embodied in granite, nourished for centuries by ambitions, faith, and mysteries that reach deep into the ages. Cologne Cathedral greets every traveler with a special, barely audible hum. It is the voice of the wind, tangled in the endless labyrinths of stone lace, and the echo of the footsteps of millions of people who passed through here long before us. Here the air is so thick with history that it seems as if the line between the past and the present is blurring. You feel a grandeur that does not oppress, but on the contrary makes you raise your head higher, beyond the limits of everyday life. Every crack in its facade, every gargoyle figure gazing down on the world from above preserves the memory of eras that disappeared into oblivion while these walls continue to grow. Before we delve into the details of its construction, the numbers and dates, it is worth just stopping and breathing in this cold spirit of Gothic architecture. After all, Cologne Cathedral is, above all, an emotion, a prayer frozen in stone, and an eternal challenge to nature itself. It is a story of how man dared to touch the heavens and the price he had to pay for it. The grandeur of Cologne Cathedral. Cologne Cathedral, or Kölner Dom, is not just Germany's main architectural landmark, but a veritable stone giant piercing the sky with its 157-meter spires in the heart of the city on the banks of the Rhine. Its history spans 6 centuries of human perseverance, faith, and incredible engineering challenges. Interestingly, even when there is complete calm around, strong air currents are almost always felt at the foot of the cathedral. This is because the massive Gothic towers become a sudden obstacle to the wind in the wide river valley, causing the air to fall rapidly. Start of construction. According to preliminary data, the foundation of this Gothic masterpiece was laid in 1248, and construction of the cathedral in its present form continued, with interruptions until 1880, more than 600 years. The temple is 144.5 meters long and 86.5 meters wide, and its 2 towers reach a height of 157 meters. However, this sacred place has a much older history. As early as 50 AD, the ancient Romans who founded Cologne built the temple of Mercury Augustus here. Later, with the spread of Christianity in the 4th century, a baptistery for baptism appeared on the same site, and in the 9th century a large 2-nave basilica was built, modeled after St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. This old cathedral basilica was consecrated in 870 and existed for quite a long time, but later burned down shortly before the foundation of Cologne Cathedral was laid. After that, in the 13th century, there was a need for something much more grandiose. The fact is that in the middle of the 12th century, the relics of the 3 holy kings, who were the first to come to the baby Jesus, were transported from Milan to Cologne. To store such a priceless relic and receive thousands of pilgrims, the city needed a worthy temple that would surpass all existing structures of that time. The construction of grandeur. Master architect Gerhard, who began the construction, decided to abandon the Romanesque style that was common in Germany at the time and turned to French Gothic, taking the cathedrals in Amiens and Paris as models. The name Gothic appeared much later. It was the Renaissance art historian Giorgio Vasari who disparagingly christened medieval architecture with this name, considering it the creation of barbarian Goths. The cathedral was built extremely slowly due to the enormous costs involved. By 1396, only the altar area and part of the south tower had been completed, after which this part was consecrated. Due to a lack of funds and the changing times, construction was halted for 300 long years. The wooden crane that remained on the unfinished tower became an ironic symbol of Cologne for centuries, hanging over the city as a silent reminder of the unfinished project. The contribution of Frederick William Fourth. The situation changed only in the 19th century during the Romantic era, when interest in the Middle Ages was reawakened in Germany. An important role was played by a chance discovery in the attic of a hotel in Darmstadt, where the original construction plans for the cathedral, dating back to the 14th century, were found. This inspired the Prussian King Frederick William Fourth to resume work in 1814. In addition to its cultural significance, there was also a political calculation behind this decision. The Protestant authorities of Prussia wanted to demonstrate their loyalty to the Catholic inhabitants of the Rhine region. In 1842, construction began for the second time. Money was collected throughout the country, in particular through special state lotteries. In today's money, the completion of the towers alone cost around 1 billion euros. When construction was finally officially completed in 1880, Cologne Cathedral became the tallest building in the world for several years, until it was surpassed by the Washington Monument in the United States. The interior of the cathedral is still impressive today. The central nave is 144 meters long, and the stained glass windows, some of which date back to the 13th century, fill the space with mystical light. Treasures of the cathedral. One of the treasures of the cathedral is the main altar. It is made of black marble with a solid slab more than 4.5 meters long forming the upper part. The front and sides are covered with white marble niches into which figures are inserted, with the coronation of the Virgin Mary in the center. Joan Halliday researched the iconography of the main altar in the cathedral. The most famous work of art in the cathedral is the Shrine of the Three Kings, commissioned by Philip von Heinsberg, Archbishop of Cologne from 1167 to 1191, and created by Nicholas of Verdun, begun in 1190. It is traditionally believed to contain the remains of the three wise men, whose relics were acquired by Frederick Barbarossa during the conquest of Milan in 1164. The reliquary is shaped like a large basilica church made of bronze and silver, gilded and decorated with architectural details, figurative sculptures, enamels, and precious stones, resembling a golden sarcophagus adorned with precious stones. The reliquary was opened in 1864 and found to contain bones and clothing. Near the sacristy is the Crucifix of Giro, a large crucifix carved from oak with traces of paint and gilding. It is believed to have been commissioned around 960 for Archbishop Giro and is the oldest large crucifix north of the Alps and the earliest known large freestanding northern sculpture of the medieval period. The Chapel of the Sacraments houses the Milan Madonna, a high Gothic carving depicting the Blessed Virgin and the infant Jesus. It was made in the workshop of Cologne Cathedral around 1290 as a replacement for the original, which was lost in a fire. The altar of the patron saints of Cologne, with an altarpiece by the international Gothic artist Stefan Lochner, is located in the Marienkapelle or Chapel of St. Mary. After its completion in 1265, the radiating chapels were immediately designated as a burial place. The relics of St. Irmgardis found their final resting place in the Chapel of St. Agnes. A trachyte sarcophagus is believed to have been created by the Cathedral Stonemasons Guild around 1280. Other works of art are located in the cathedral treasury. Built into the inner wall are a pair of stone tablets inscribed with the provisions formulated by Archbishop Engelbert Dowie from 1262 to 1267, according to which Jews were allowed to live in Cologne. The Giant's Bells. The cathedral has 11 church bells, 4 of which are medieval. The first was the 3.8-ton Drakonigsklok Three Kings bell, cast in 1418, installed in 1437 and recast in 1880. Two other bells, the Gloriosa, weighing 10.5 tons and at that time the largest bell in the Western world, and the Speciosa, weighing 5.6 tons, were installed in 1448 and remain in place to this day. During the 19th century, as construction neared completion, there was a desire to increase the number of bells. This was facilitated by Kaiser Wilhelm I, who donated French bronze cannons captured in 1870 to 1871 for this purpose. 22 artillery pieces were displayed in front of the cathedral on May 11, 1872. Andreas Ham in Frankenthal used them to cast a bell weighing over 27 tons on August 19, 1873. The tone was disharmonious, so another attempt was made on November 13, 1873. The Central Cathedral Association, which agreed to cover the costs, did not accept this new bell either. Another attempt was made on October 3, 1874. The colossal bell was delivered to Cologne and installed in the cathedral on May 13, 1875. This Kaiserglock was eventually melted down in 1918 to support the German war effort. The Kaiserglock was the largest free-swinging bell in history. On Thursday, March 3, 2022, iconic cathedrals across Europe rang their bells simultaneously in solidarity with Ukraine as passers-by gathered to mourn those killed during the Russian invasion and pray for peace. Cologne Cathedral was among them. The Cathedral War and Modern Times. During World War II, the cathedral miraculously survived the devastating bombing of Cologne. Although the building was damaged by shock waves, it remained standing amid the ruins of the city. There is a theory that Allied pilots deliberately did not destroy the cathedral because they used its tall towers as a geographical landmark during their flights. For the city's residents, the surviving temple became a symbol of hope for rebirth. Today, the cathedral, which is on the UNESCO list, is visited by about 6 million tourists a year. That's more than 15,000 people every day. But construction never stops. Due to the effects of acid rain and wind, the soft sandstone is constantly being destroyed, so restorers work here 7 days a week. A local legend says that as long as the scaffolding stands on the cathedral and the work continues, the city of Cologne will stand. Shadow of the Devil over the Rhine. When the sunlight fades over the Rhine and the shadows of the huge Gothic spires fall on the cobblestones, Cologne Cathedral ceases to be just an architectural landmark. At this time of day, it becomes the backdrop to one of the darkest legends of medieval Europe. It is said that such a grandiose design could not have been created by human minds alone, and that behind every perfect curve of stone lies a dark pact sealed with blood. The main myth of the cathedral is associated with its first builder, Master Gerhard. Legend has it that the architect was so obsessed with the idea of building the largest temple in the world that his mind began to fade from the strain. He could not find a solution for the perfect blueprints that would withstand the weight of thousands of tons of stone rising to the heavens. One evening, while walking along the banks of the Rhine, he met a stranger who was drawing incredible diagrams in the sand with a stick. It was the devil himself. He offered Gerhard a deal. The architect would receive the finished drawings of the cathedral, according to which the temple would be completed in record time, but in return he would have to give up his soul as well as the souls of his wife and child. However, there was one condition that gave Gerhard a chance of salvation. The devil said that he must complete the construction and bring water from the Rhine directly to the cathedral before the first rooster crowed on the day the work was completed. The architect, blinded by the grandeur of the future temple, agreed. But his wife, learning of the terrible price, decided to outwit the devil. She learned to imitate the crowing of a rooster. In the morning, when the construction was almost complete and the devil was just finishing the underground water channel, the woman crowed like a rooster before dawn. The devil, thinking he had lost, destroyed part of the building in a rage and cursed the cathedral. He exclaimed that from that moment on, as soon as the last brick was laid in place, the end of the world would come. This is where the modern urban myth originates. The cathedral will never be completed. Local residents seriously or jokingly believe that the ongoing restoration work is not just a fight against stone erosion, but a way to delay the apocalypse. As soon as the last scaffolding is removed and the last gargoyle is fixed in place, the devil's curse will take effect, and the world will plunge into darkness. The legend of the Black Restorer. It is said that among the scaffolding that has surrounded the cathedral for decades, a strange figure in old, greasy mason's clothes is sometimes seen. Locals call him the Eternal Restorer. According to legend, he is the spirit of a 14th century master builder who made a fatal mistake in his calculations, causing part of the vault to nearly collapse. Now he is doomed to check every joint and every crack in the stonework every night, trying to make amends for his mistake. They say that if a builder hears the sound of a hammer striking stone behind him when no one else is around, it is a good sign. The spirit is showing that the structure will hold. The curse of the golden sarcophagus. There is a legend that the shrine of the Three Kings is protected not only by locks but also by an ancient spell. In the Middle Ages, it was believed that if anyone dared to open the sarcophagus with impure thoughts or tried to steal the relics, Cologne would be flooded. Interestingly, when the reliquary was finally opened for research in 1864, for the first time in 600 years, the city was hit by an unprecedented flood. The Rhine burst its banks so badly that it flooded part of the old town. Coincidence or not, since then the opening of the sarcophagus has been accompanied by great fear among local residents. The mystery of the windows from hell. In one of the southern stained glass windows, if you look closely from a certain angle, you can see a face that resembles neither a saint nor a pilgrim. Legend has it that one of the glassmakers was so impressed by the fire that destroyed the previous cathedral that he inserted a piece of glass tempered in that devilish fire into the new stained glass window. They say that this glass always remains warm to the touch, even in the most severe frost, and that it is supposedly a portal through which evil forces try to observe what is happening inside the temple. The sleeping nights of the dungeon. For decades, a legend has circulated among the children of Cologne that deep beneath the cathedral's foundations, where the remains of Roman walls still stand, there is a secret room. In it, knights who guard the city are said to sit at a round table, fast asleep in a magical slumber. They will only wake up when the cathedral is threatened with complete destruction. It is said that it was their invisible presence that diverted bombs during World War II, creating a dome of calm over the building. The weeping gargoyle. Among the hundreds of stone monsters on the facade, there is one gargoyle that stands out. Unlike the others, which look terrifying, this one looks sad. Legend has it that a stonemason immortalized his son who fell from the scaffolding during construction. They say that when it rains, water flows from this gargoyle as if it were actually shedding tears. And anyone who washes their face with this water will be protected from accidents at height. The legend of the cathedral mouse and eternal gratitude. Among the endless number of stone figures, chimeras, and saints on the walls of the cathedral, there is a small, barely noticeable figure of a mouse. Legend has it that during the Great Famine in the Middle Ages, when the city's granaries were empty and people began to despair, one of the stonemasons noticed a mouse that brought several grains of wheat to the cathedral every day. The master followed it and found a forgotten Roman warehouse with grain hidden deep in the dungeons under the foundation. This saved the city from starvation. As a token of gratitude, the stonemason carved a small mouse on the wall of the cathedral. They say that whoever finds it among thousands of ornaments and touches it will never know poverty, and their home will always be full. The curse of the crane on the South Tower. The wooden crane, which stood on the South Tower for over 3 centuries, became the object of genuine superstitious fear. When construction stopped in the 16th century, many tried to remove the crane to use the wood for heating or other needs. However, everyone who tried to do so died under strange circumstances. Some fell from dizzying heights, while others simply had their hearts stop as soon as they touched the ropes. Rumors spread throughout the city that the devil, having lost a bet to the architect, personally sealed the crane as a symbol of the defeat of human ambition. Over time, the people of Cologne became so accustomed to it that when it was finally removed in the 19th century to complete the tower, many older residents cried, believing that the city had lost its magical protection. The ghost of Master Gerhard and his fall. Historically, the first architect of the cathedral, Master Gerhard, did indeed die during construction, falling from the scaffolding under unexplained circumstances. The legend adds drama. They say that on that night he was arguing with the devil again. The devil mocked him, claiming that the cathedral would never be perfect. Unable to bear the doubt, Gerhard threw himself down. Since then it is said that on a full moon, a tall figure in a medieval cloak can be seen on the upper tiers of the towers, measuring the parapets with his steps. This is the ghost of the architect, who continues his endless calculations, trying to find a mistake that does not exist. If the ghost stops and looks down at the square, it portends great changes in the fate of Germany. The energy of the place? Another layer of myths concerns the very energy of this place. Esotericists claim that the cathedral stands at the intersection of powerful ley lines, energy channels of the earth that were used by the ancient Romans for their pagan rituals. It is said that there is an extensive system of underground passages beneath the cathedral that are not marked on any official map. These labyrinths are said to contain not only the bones of ancient bishops, but also the alchemical laboratories of medieval masters who sought the philosopher's stone under the protection of the holy walls. The gargoyles and chimeras that adorn the facade deserve special attention. The people believed that at night these stone monsters came to life to protect the temple from evil spirits. But there is also a darker version. Supposedly these are frozen sinners who tried to prevent the construction, and God's punishment chained them to the walls of the cathedral forever, forcing them to spew rainwater eternally. Even the fact that the cathedral survived World War II is considered by many to be not a coincidence or the result of careful planning by pilots, but a true mystical intervention. While everything around it was burning and the neighboring districts were turning to ashes, the cathedral stood firm as if surrounded by an invisible shield. Some say that it was the spirits of the three kings whose relics rest in a golden sarcophagus who held the sky above their last refuge. Today, Cologne Cathedral continues to breathe legends. Every new stone replaced by restorers, every new ghost story in the dark galleries only reinforces the status of this place as one of the most mysterious points on the map of Europe. It is a building where architecture meets eternity and human ambitions meet otherworldly forces. Beyond time and stone. When the last rays of the sun sink into the dark waters of the Rhine and the large spires dissolve into the night sky, it becomes clear that Cologne Cathedral is not just a building. It is a living organism that breathes through the centuries, absorbing the prayers of pilgrims, the hopes of builders, and the whispers of the winds themselves. Its stones, weathered by storms and hardened by history, remember the touch of hands that have long since turned to dust but left a piece of their soul in every curve of the Gothic arch. To be near this giant is to feel the true scale of humanity striving for infinity. We come and go, generations replace one another like waves on a river, but it remains an unshakable landmark in the stormy ocean of time. Its walls have seen the rise and fall of empires, heard the rumble of wars and the quiet singing of Christmas carols. Every glimmer of light on the ancient stained glass windows encodes the memory that true beauty is never truly complete. It is always in progress, always in motion, always demanding our care and attention. Perhaps the legend of the end of the world coming with the last brick laid is not a threat but a reminder. A reminder that our lives are also an eternal construction, where each day is a new stone in the foundation of something greater. The cathedral teaches us patience. It shows that grand dreams take time and that even if we do not see the end result of our work, it will still be meaningful for those who come after us. Today, as hundreds of years ago, Cologne Cathedral towers over the city as a symbol of resilience and indomitable spirit. It stands as a bridge between the past and the future, between earth and heaven, between the real world and the world of legends. And while the wind blows over its towers and the restorers continue their slow work, we can be sure that history continues. And in this history, each of us is just a passerby who stopped for a moment, struck by the breath of eternity emanating from these cold but living walls. A stone prayer reaching for the sun. There are buildings in the world that are born and die with their eras, but there are those that become eras themselves. In the heart of sunny Barcelona, amid the bustling streets of the Eixample district, stands something that cannot be grasped at a glance. It is not just a cathedral, it is a forest frozen in stone, a prayer that has not ceased for over a century, and a dream that refuses to bow to time. When you first see these amazing towers, it seems as if they have grown out of the ground itself, like giant sandcastles carefully sculpted by the hand of some fairy tale titan. There are no straight lines here because nature knows no rulers, and there are no random stones because each of them is a separate chapter in a great book. This is a place where architecture meets mysticism and engineering meets infinity. This is the Sagrada Familia. A lifetime of construction. The history of this masterpiece, officially known as the expiatory temple of the Holy Family, began back when horse-drawn carriages roamed the streets and candles lit the homes. The first stone was laid in 1882. Francisco del Villar initially worked on the project, but fate had other plans. A year later, the young and brilliant Antonio Gaudi took over, a man whose imagination knew no bounds and whose life became inextricably linked to this construction. Gaudi completely redesigned the original plan, transforming an ordinary temple into something otherworldly. However, this is one of the main reasons why the cathedral is still under construction. From the very beginning, it was decided that the construction would be financed exclusively by private donations from parishioners. This is a penitential temple, and every stone was purchased with money from people who believe in this idea. There is no state funding or church taxes here. Every coin thrown into the box by tourists or locals becomes part of a new column or spire. A challenge to technology and time. You may ask why in an era of skyscrapers that are built in a matter of months is this cathedral taking so long to construct? It's not just about money. The Sagrada Familia is an architectural puzzle of incredible complexity. Every stone block here is unique. Modern architects have to use complex computer models to calculate the shape of each element, because Gaudi conceived shapes that were previously considered impossible to realize in stone. Each detail requires individual processing and precision fitting, which turns construction into an endless process of creating a masterpiece by hand. The cathedral stands on land that does not formally belong to the church, and the process is not supervised by the official episcopate. It is a free creative endeavor fueled solely by the will of the people. Nevertheless, the scale of the project amazes the whole world. In 2006, the number of people who came to see this eternal construction project exceeded 2 million, putting the cathedral on a par with the world's greatest palaces and museums. Record holder among the heavens. Today, the Sagrada Familia has already changed the Barcelona skyline. In 2025, the cathedral officially became the tallest Christian church in the world. Its central towers rise so high that it seems as if they touch the Creator himself, whom Gaudi so often mentioned. He built this temple not for his contemporaries but for future generations. And although the master never saw the completion of his work, his spirit can be felt in every colorful reflection of the stained glass windows that flood the interior with mystical light. This building teaches us that truly great things cannot be rushed. Because the Sagrada Familia is not just architecture, it is a symbol that the human spirit can be higher than any stone and longer than any human life. The first design was developed by architect Francisco del Villar, who was replaced at the end of 1883 by Antonio Gaudi, who significantly changed the original design. According to the decision of the initiators of the cathedral's construction, the work is to be financed exclusively by donations from parishioners, which is one of the reasons for such a long construction period. Origins, a bookseller's dream and the first stone. It all began not with architectural drawings, but with the pure faith of one man. Josep Maria Bacabella, a bookseller from Barcelona and a man of fervent faith, founded the Association of Devotees of Saint Joseph, and after traveling to Italy became inspired with the idea of bringing a piece of holiness to his native land. At first, he dreamed of a copy of the Italian Holy House in Loriro, but fate brought him together with architect Francisco del Villar. He convinced the client that Barcelona did not need a replica of the past, but a majestic neo-Gothic cathedral that would become a symbol of gratitude for the entire nation. Money was collected bit by bit, and finally in 1881 a plot of land was purchased. At that time, it was a wasteland a few kilometers from the city. No one could have imagined that the metropolis would eventually engulf this area, making it its epicenter. On March 19, 1882, St. Joseph's Day, the first stone was laid. This day is considered the start of construction. But the history of the Sagrada Familia as we know it began a little later, when, due to technical differences, Del Villar left the project, passing the baton to the young, still little-known Antonio Gaudi. Crypt, the foundation of a future miracle. Gaudi started with what was already there, the underground part, the crypt. Here he showed his character for the first time. He didn't just finish what had been started, but raised the vault higher, letting daylight into the underground. In the center, he installed a lock with an incredible relief of the Annunciation, and around the walls he created a special moat. It was a brilliant engineering solution to protect the temple from moisture and fill the gloomy underground with lively sunlight. A decisive turning point from the cross to the forest. A real turning point came at the end of the 1880s. A huge anonymous donation gave the architect free rein. Gaudi realized that he did not want to build just another copy of a medieval church. He decided to turn the cathedral into a stone gospel. Keeping only the general layout in the form of a Latin cross, he completely changed the design. The towers were to become giants communicating with the world through symbols. In 1892, the architect began work on the Nativity facade. It was a clever calculation on the part of the master. He feared that if he began building the Passion Facade first, austere, harsh, dedicated to the death of Christ, the city's residents would simply be frightened and stop supporting the construction. Therefore, he chose the path of joy, decorating the cathedral with figures inspired by nature itself. He even decorated the gutters and towers with snails and lizards that he saw around the construction site. Thus, the nature of Catalonia became forever intertwined with the sacred walls. In 1895, work on the neo-Gothic apse was completed. Around this time, part of the cloister corresponding to the portal of the Holy Virgin of the Rosary was built, decorated with rich ornamentation and symbolism. The portal of the Holy Virgin of the Rosary itself was completed in 1899. A school for children and the architecture of the future. Gaudi cared not only about stones but also about people. In 1910, right next to the giant walls, he built a small temporary school for the children of construction workers. It was an amazing structure without load-bearing walls, with a wavy roof that was held up by its shape. This ephemeral little house became a harbinger of future architecture, light, plastic, and rational. The master created a space where the interior partitions could be moved, adapting the classrooms to the needs of the children. A forest of tree-like columns. In 1911, Gaudi completed the design for the Passion Facade, followed by the Glory Facade. He had an idea that would not leave him alone. The interior of the cathedral should resemble a forest. Columns branching out like tree branches were to support the vaults, and light through colored stained glass windows was to create the feeling of sunbeams shining through the leaves. Every detail was an icon, every curve a code. On November 30, 1925, the first 100-meter bell tower dedicated to St. Barnabas was completed. It was the only tower that Gaudi lived to see completed. He devoted more than 40 years of his life to this temple, often living right in his workshop among drawings and models. He knew he would not complete the construction, but he believed that his client, God himself, was in no hurry. And now we see how this slow eternity continues to grow, bringing to life the vision of a man who knew how to talk to stone. The test of time, rising from the ashes. After Gaudi's tragic death under the wheels of a tram in 1926, construction did not stop. The baton was taken up by his loyal colleague Domnech Sugranes, who had worked with Gaudi since 1902 and helped build the Sagrada Familia and many other famous buildings, such as the Casa Batlló and Casa Mila. He managed to complete 3 bells on the Nativity facade and finish the ceramic cypress tree that crowns the entrance, but soon the clouds of the Civil War gathered over Spain, and Domnech I Gaudi himself passed away in 1938. These were dark times for the cathedral. In 1936, a fire completely destroyed Gaudi's workshop, along with priceless models and original drawings. It seemed that the secret of the Sagrada Familia was lost forever. however. The fanatical devotion of his followers allowed some of the plans to be pieced together bit by bit. It was not until 1952 that work resumed, and the Nativity facade finally received its first illumination, which later became permanent. The Passion Facade and the Eye Sculpture of Stone. In 1954, construction began on the second large facade, the Passion Facade. In contrast to the joyful Nativity, this side of the cathedral tells the story of Christ's suffering and death. Its architecture is harsh, angular, almost painful. The work was based on designs and research carried out by Gaudi between 1892 and 1917. After the Crypt was completed in 1961, a museum dedicated to the historical, technical, artistic, and symbolic aspects of the project was opened there. In 1977, 4 towers were erected here, and later the stained glass windows of the Resurrection and the majestic bronze figure of the Ascension appeared. It was only in the first decade of the 21st century that the vault of the gallery, the transept, and the apse were completed. The construction caused a lot of controversy. In 2008, more than 400 cultural figures called for the work to be stopped, fearing that modern restoration for the sake of tourism would spoil Gaudi's spirit. But the cathedral, like a living organism, continued to grow despite criticism and the 2020 pandemic, which once again froze the taps for a while. However, the work continued. New records and digital technologies. Between 2010 and 2025, the cathedral's appearance changed beyond recognition. The towers of the Evangelists, the Tower of the Virgin Mary, and the grandiose 170-meter Tower of the Central Lantern were built. In October 2025, the Sagrada Familia officially became the tallest Christian church in the world, reaching a height of 162.9 meters. It surpassed the long-standing record holder Ulm Cathedral. But the most interesting thing is hidden inside the stone. To connect the details that Gaudi conceived over a century ago, builders used stainless steel, epoxy resins, and prestressed stone technology. This combination of ancient sandstone, marble, and modern reinforced concrete structures makes the cathedral a true engineering marvel. The geometry of God inside the stone forest. The interior of the temple is a celebration of higher mathematics, which Gaudi considered to be the language of nature. The master deliberately avoided straight lines. Instead, he used such complex geometric shapes as hyperboloids, conoids, and ellipsoids. After 1914, these figures became the basis of the entire project, since they are all formed by the movement of a straight line. This allowed the details to be perfectly matched to each other. The main support of the temple is its unique columns. At the base, they are shaped like stars with different numbers of rays, but as they rise, they gradually transform into a circle, twisting into spirals. As the columns approach the ceiling, they begin to branch out, creating the illusion of an endless forest. This is not just decoration, it is a precise calculation of the center of gravity, which allows the towers to support their enormous weight. Music and light. The towers of the cathedral resemble sand castles, but their shape is dictated by the spiral staircases inside. Gaudi dreamed of the cathedral making music. At the top of the towers, he planned tubular bells that would play along with 5 organs and a choir of 1,500 singers. The entire facade is decorated with liturgical texts and calls of glory to the Most High, and the spires are crowned with symbols of episcopal power. Today, with construction of the central tower nearing completion in 2026, the cathedral is preparing to reach its final height of 172 meters. It will be a moment when the earthly labor of thousands of people will finally be united with the heavenly vision of a genius who knew he was building eternity. First, beauty. The Nativity facade, most of which was created during Gaudi's lifetime, consists of 3 portals glorifying the Christian virtues of faith, hope, and charity. The portals are decorated with realistic sculptures dedicated to the earthly life of Christ. Above the left portal of hope are scenes of the betrothal of Mary and Joseph, the flight to Egypt, and the massacre of the infants, while its pediment symbolically depicts Mount Montserrat with the inscription "Save us." The right portal of faith contains sculptural scenes of the meeting of Elizabeth and the Virgin Mary, Jesus and the Pharisees, the presentation in the temple, and Jesus working in the carpenter's workshop. Above the central portal, under the Christmas star, are sculptural groups depicting the birth of Jesus and the adoration of the shepherds and magi. And above them are figures of angels announcing the birth of Christ, scenes from the Annunciation and the marriage of the Virgin Mary, etc. High above the portal rises a symbolic tree surrounded by birds. View from the Passion Tower. The spindle-shaped bell towers, reminiscent of sandcastles, are defined by the structure of the spiral staircases inside. Each tower is dedicated to its own apostle, whose statues are placed at the points where the towers change shape from square to round. Gaudi planned to place tubular bells at the top of the towers, whose ringing would combine with the sound of 5 organs and the voices of 1,500 singers located. According to the architect's design, on both sides of the longitudinal naves and on the inside of the glory facade. At the top of each bell tower is the motto "Glory to the Most High" or Hosanna Excelsis, above which rise polychrome spires decorated with stylized images of the symbols of the episcopal office, the ring, mitre, crozier, and cross. Liturgical texts are widely used in the decoration, and the main gate of the Passion Facade is decorated with quotations from the Bible in several languages, including Catalan. The Glory Facade is to be decorated with the words of the apostolic symbol of faith. Various types of stone are used in the construction, such as sandstone, marble, granite, basalt, porphyry, travertine, high-strength reinforced concrete, epoxy resins, and stainless steel. Interior of the Sagrada Familia. Realizing that the temple would not be completed during his lifetime, Gaudi planned many of the interior details. The desire to avoid straight lines, along with the desire to simplify the design, led to the fundamental decision to use geometric figures with curved surfaces such as hyperboloids, hyperbolic paraboloids, helicoids, and conoids. All these surfaces can be obtained by the movement of a straight line, so their intersection can be a straight line, which greatly facilitates the articulation of various structural details. Another geometric figure, the ellipsoid, is also used in the design. Light in the interior space. Geometric shapes appeared in the project after about 1914. Earlier experiments by the master with the shape of columns and other interior details still contain the aforementioned strict geometric surfaces, but indicate the architect's desire to find specific spatial solutions known only to him. Thus, when designing the interior of the Nativity facade, Gaudi used columns with a circular cross-section with a helical or double helical pattern at the top of the shaft, while the rosary portal features twisted columns with flutes twisted in the form of one or more helices. Paints of the Holy Family Church. Everything in the interior is subject to strict geometric laws. Round and elliptical windows and stained glass, hyperbolic vaults, helical staircases, numerous stars that appear at the intersections of various linear surfaces and decorate the ellipsoidal columns. This is an incomplete list of the geometric details of the temple's decoration. The main load-bearing element in the construction of the main volume of the church is the columns, which distribute the weight of the towers and vaults. Depending on the load, the columns vary in cross-section thickness and height. The cross-sections of the column bases are star-shaped with a varying number of vertices from 4 to 12, determined by the load on the column, with a slight parabolic rounding of the rays on the inner and outer diameters. With height, the shape of the column cross-section gradually changes from a star to a circle, which is achieved by increasing the number of grooves, achieved by simultaneously turning the initial star template to the left and right. As they approach the vaults, the columns branch out, creating a previously unseen structure in the form of a forest. This unusual architectural solution was initially dictated by a structural necessity, the search for the center of gravity of the part of the vault resting on the column. From stone to mystery. But behind every precise calculation, every cubic meter of concrete, and every ton of hardened steel lies something that cannot be measured with a ruler or calculated on a computer. The Sagrada Familia is not only a triumph of engineering, but also a veritable labyrinth of mysteries that have been born in the shadow of its giant towers over the years. They say that when it comes to a structure of this scale, which takes an eternity to build, it begins to live its own life, becoming overgrown with legends like walls with moss. It is said that Gaudi left us not just drawings, but an encrypted message, the key to which is hidden in the very geometry of the temple. What if these strange shapes are not just architectural whims, but ancient codes that we are only now beginning to decipher? Let's put aside the dates and building permits and look behind the curtain of reality to a place where myths reign, where stones have eyes and numbers on the walls whisper prophecies. After all, even in the shadows, the Sagrada Familia hides more meaning than in the bright sunlight. Gaudi's magic square. On the Passion Facade, there is a strange stone square with numbers. If you add them in any direction, horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, the sum is always 33. Officially, this is the age of Christ at the time of his crucifixion. However, conspiracy theorists see this as a Masonic trace, since 33 is the highest degree of initiation in the lodges. Gaudi was often accused of occultism, although he himself was a deeply devout Catholic. It is said that this square is not just a mathematical toy, but the key to a secret entrance to the underground, where the architect's true intentions are hidden. Prediction of his own death. There is a legend that Gaudi was so angry with his creation that he began to see the future through its walls. It is said that a few days before the fatal tram accident in 1926, the master stood for a long time in front of the Nativity facade and said to his assistants, "Soon construction will stop, but do not be afraid, I will help you from there." His death looked like an accident, he looked like an ordinary beggar, and no one recognized the genius of Barcelona in the old man. They say that he deliberately chose such a death in order to dissolve forever into his project. The stone eyes of the temple. Many tourists notice that at dusk, the figures on the facades begin to look too realistic. There is a grim myth that Gaudi, in order to create the sculptures for the scene of the massacre of the innocents, which we completely condemn as an act, made plaster casts of real stillborn children provided to him by local hospitals in order to convey the full horror of the tragedy, which we also condemn as an act, even though it is a myth. This story has frightened visitors for decades, adding to the cathedral's reputation as a place where the boundary between life and stone is almost non-existent. Geometry as a portal. Some researchers believe that Gaudi was not just building a temple, but creating an antenna for communication with other worlds. According to esotericists, the use of hyperboloids and paraboloids is aimed at accumulating cosmic energy. They believe that when all the towers are completed, the cathedral will begin to emit a sound of a special frequency that will change the consciousness of everyone nearby. Columns dripping with blood. There is a legend that Gaudi embedded a biological code in the cathedral's design. Some mystics claim that if you look at the cross-section of the columns where the stars we mentioned are located, they resemble the structure of DNA or the cellular structure of plants, which was not widely known in Gaudi's time. It is said that the architect believed that the cathedral was a living being. Local legends say that on certain days of the year, when the setting sun turns bright red and passes through the stained glass windows of the Passion Facade, it seems as if the white columns inside begin to pulsate and fill with blood, coming to life along with the city. The mystery of the dragon and St. George. Barcelona is the city of St. George or San Jordi, who defeated the dragon, Although the cathedral is dedicated to the Holy Family, Gaudi hid the figure of a dragon in it. Legend has it that this dragon is not just decoration, but the guardian of the architect's secret knowledge. It is said that it is positioned so that its gaze is directed precisely at another of the master's creations, Parkgel. Esotericists believe that all of Gaudi's buildings in the city are connected by invisible energy lines, and that the Sagrada Familia is the brain of this network, controlling the spirit of the whole of Barcelona. The prophecy about 2026. This is one of the most popular modern myths. The year of completion, 2026, was chosen not only because it marks the centenary of Gaudi's death. There is a belief that Gaudi left a note in his encrypted diary stating that the cathedral should be completed when the world faces a great trial, and that the completion of the central tower of Christ would be a sign of the beginning of a new golden age for humanity. Many believe that when the last cross is erected at a height of 172 meters, Barcelona will experience such a surge of energy that the city will become the New Jerusalem. Gaudi's final resting place. Gaudi is buried in the crypt of the cathedral, but myth has it that he is not there. It is said that the architect, who knew every nook and cranny of his temple, designed a secret room cell for himself deep under the foundation, where he allegedly continues to live in a state of samat or deep meditation. It is said that stonemasons working the night shift sometimes hear the sound of footsteps and the cough of an old man echoing from the ventilation shafts. They believe that the master himself supervises the installation of each new detail, and if he does not like something, the tools break and the equipment malfunctions for no reason. A symphony without end. As the sun slowly sinks behind the hills of Montjuic, painting the spires of the Sagrada Familia in shades of blood red and gold, it becomes clear that this cathedral will never be just a finished building. It is an endless stream of thoughts frozen in porphyry and basalt, which continues its movement through the decades. Each new column rising to the vault, each new detail added by modern craftsmen, is a continuation of the great conversation between man and heaven. We are used to living in a world where everything has a beginning and an end, where buildings are erected in a matter of months and projects are completed by strict deadlines. But here at the foot of the giant tree-like columns, this rush disappears. The cathedral teaches us another dimension of being. It whispers to us that truly important things require patience, that a dream can be longer than a single human life, and that eternity cannot be conquered by a work schedule. Even when the last central tower touches the clouds in 2026, work on this stone book will not be finished. After all, the Sagrada Familia is a living forest that is constantly changing under the influence of the wind, sunlight, and the gaze of millions of people. It is a place where sand becomes a shrine and ordinary stone acquires a voice. Perhaps the true meaning of this cathedral is not to be completed, but to be an eternal witness to our striving for perfection. And while clouds float above its towers and light plays in its halls, we know that as long as this temple is being built, there is hope that beauty and faith can overcome any earthly obstacle. This is a message from the past that we are still trying to read, and a prayer that will continue as long as this wonderful world stands. The Ulm giant when stone meets brick. In the south of Germany, where the waters of the Danube carry their stories through picturesque valleys, lies the city of Ulm. It could have remained just one of the cozy corners of Bavaria if not for one detail that makes every passerby hold their breath and throw their heads so high that their eyes are dizzy. In the very center of the city, like a giant stone finger pointing into infinity, rises Ulm Cathedral. This is not just a church, it is a manifesto of human will. It is so colossal that no camera lens is able to fully absorb its grandeur, and the human eye refuses to believe in the reality of such a scale. The 161-meter giant, which for centuries has held the sky on its shoulders, has become a symbol of the city that gave the world the genius of Albert Einstein. and while Einstein solved the mysteries of space and time. Ulm Cathedral itself is proof that time is but sand when true faith and architectural genius take hold. The cathedral that never became a cathedral. Interestingly, despite its incredible size and familiar name of the cathedral, this building has never been the residence of a bishop. It is the largest parish church in the world, which was built not at the behest of the church authorities, but at the expense of free citizens. Conceived in 1377 as a Catholic temple in honor of the Virgin Mary, it became Lutheran in the 16th century, having survived the turbulent times of the Reformation. If you look closely at the facade of the cathedral, you can see the engineering cunning of the masters of the past. Although the towers and decorative elements are carved from noble sandstone, the main walls of the nave and choir are actually built of visible brick. That is why Ulm Cathedral is considered one of the largest brick buildings in the world, holding the lead together with the churches of Gdansk and Munich. 5 centuries of waiting from Catholicism to the Reformation. The history of this masterpiece began back in 1377. Ulm was then a wealthy imperial city, and its residents decided to build something that would overshadow all the surrounding cathedrals. According to the plan, it was supposed to be a majestic Catholic church, but the history of Europe made its own adjustments. When the waves of the Reformation swept across Germany, the cathedral lost its fate and passed to the Lutherans. Tired of being subordinate to a distant monastery and constant threats, 10,000 residents of the city made a bold decision to build a new independent church right in the center at their own expense. On June 30, Mayor Ludwig Kraft laid the first stone, and everyone came out to build. Even the women of the city helped lay the foundation. Initially, the architects from the Parlor family planned a whole church, but the ambitions of the townspeople grew faster than the walls. They wanted the highest spire in the world. To balance such a gigantic tower, the height of the nave had to be significantly raised, which forever changed the proportions of the church. However, the path to the top was incredibly thorny. Lack of money, political strife, and exhausting wars led to the fact that for more than 300 years Ulm Cathedral stood unfinished, like an abandoned giant waiting for its revival. Only 513 years after the laying of the first stone in 1890, was the cross finally erected above the city on the highest spire. It was not just a ceremony, it was a victory of spirit over circumstances. 5 centuries of patience for the sake of one moment of triumph. Engineering drama, step to disaster. Ulm's history is not only a triumph, but also a struggle against mistakes. At the end of the 15th century, the architect Matthias Berblinger almost made a fatal mistake. He loaded the columns with vaults that were too heavy. The cathedral began to crack. The situation was saved by the master Burkhard Engelberg, who literally pulled the building out of the precipice, strengthening the foundation of the tower and replacing the heavy structures with lighter ones. However, the scars remained. Even today, the north wall of the cathedral protrudes 27 centimeters outward, reminding us of how fragile greatness can be. Construction stopped in 1543 at the 100-meter mark. The world changed. The Reformation made Ulm Protestant, and the discovery of America by Columbus and new sea routes by Magellan shifted trade axes. The city's economy faded, and the unfinished giant fell asleep for 3 long centuries. Mystical code, numbers, and masons. Among Gothic scholars, there is a theory that Ulm Cathedral is a giant stone book of encrypted knowledge. It is said that the architects from the Parlor family belonged to secret lodges and laid the golden ratio and numerological codes in the proportions of the temple. Local legend claims that if you multiply the number of steps by the height of the main spire and divide by the number of windows, you will get the date when the world will face a great cataclysm. Some even looked for the number of the beast on the bas-reliefs, believing that the cathedral is not only a house of prayer, but also a talisman that restrains otherworldly forces under the foundation, where an underground tributary of the Danube flows. The architects cursed the price of height. It is said that each of the cathedral's chief builders left a part of their soul here literally. There is a dark myth about Matthias Berblinger, the same man whose calculations nearly brought the cathedral down. It is said that when he realized his mistake, he made a deal with the dark forces to keep the walls standing. But the price was a halt to construction for hundreds of years. Legend has it that Berblinger's spirit still wanders the galleries at a height of 140 meters. The builders working on the restoration sometimes hear the hammering of a hammer where no one is. They believe that it is the ghost of the master trying to correct his mistakes in the stone that he did not have time to complete during his lifetime. The final push and 768 steps. For those who want to see the world from a bird's eye view, the cathedral has prepared a real test. The observation deck on the spire opens a breathtaking panorama. In clear weather, the snow-capped Alps loom on the horizon, looking like white ghosts against the blue sky. But you have to pay for this beauty. You have to climb 768 narrow stone steps inside the spiral staircase. This is a path where every step echoes for centuries, and the walls seem to whisper the stories of those who climbed here hundreds of years ago. Heart of the temple. Inside the cathedral lives another legend, its organ. This is the heart of the temple, which was once destroyed by iconoclasts but revived at the end of the 16th century. It is known that in 1763 the hands of the young Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart touched these keys. They say that the sounds of this organ have a special frequency. They are able to make not only the glass in the stained glass windows tremble, but also the human soul itself, filling it with an incomprehensible thrill. Only in 1844 did work resume. The masters of the 19th century not only completed the cathedral, but also added another 10 meters of height to it above the medieval plan. On May 31, 1890, the cross finally shone over Ulm. Today, the last stage of the climb is a spiral staircase so narrow that there is barely enough space for one person there. This is a path through the heart of a brick church, where the facades are built of red clay and the spire is made of elegant sandstone. Brick sole and stone crown. As already mentioned, the main walls of the nave and choir are actually built of red brick, while the towers and lace spires are carved from noble sandstone brought from the Olgau. Ulm Cathedral is considered one of the largest brick buildings in the world. This combination of strong earthen bricks and a fragile stone spire that shoots into the sky creates a unique architectural contrast. Inside, the cathedral holds treasures that miraculously survived the wars of religion. Here you will see the choir stalls of the 15th century, a real masterpiece of oak, where hundreds of busts are carved, and the unique altar triptych of the Holy Family. But the most amazing thing is the stained glass windows. The 5 windows of the apse, dating from the 14th century, still paint the interior with biblical scenes, just as they did 500 years ago. Gargoyle symbolism, guardians of the threshold. If you look closely at the bizarre gargoyles that adorn the facades, you will notice among them not only demons, but also figures that resemble the sinners of the time, greedy merchants and drunkards. The myth says that at night these stone monsters come to life and descend to the Danube to drink water. But woe to the traveler who meets their gaze in the moonlight. They say that such a person will forever lose his peace and begin to dream of heights, until he returns to the cathedral to remain in its shadow forever. Voice of the tower, Gloriosa and the Black Bell. 13 bells live at the top of the tower, each with its own character. The main bell, called Gloriosa, weighs several tons and fills the city with a thick, velvety sound. Separate bells serve to mark the time. The Leichenglocke announces the quarter hour, and the Dominica bell announces every hour. But there is one special one among them, the Schwarzglocke or Black Bell. This is the oldest inhabitant of the tower. It is the only one that is never touched by electronics. Only once a year, on the so-called Shrove Monday, is it rung manually. This sound is a direct link to the Middle Ages, the voice of history itself, heard only by the chosen ones. Einstein, Mozart, and the Beggar. Ulm Cathedral is a meeting place for great names. In 1763, a young Mozart sat at its organ. At that time, it was the largest organ in the world, and its sound under the cathedral's vaults was so impressive that it had to be reconstructed in the 20th century to tame the incredible acoustics and echoes. However, there is another touching story in the cathedral. Under the main organ stands a statue of the prophet Jeremiah. The money for its installation in 1877 was donated by the city's Jewish community, among whom was Hermann Einstein, the father of the future genius Albert Einstein. This is a symbol of the fact that the cathedral has always been a matter for the whole city, regardless of faith or origin. And modern sculptures such as Ernst Barlach's Beggar or the new bizarre gargoyles on the facade show that this temple continues to live and absorb new eras. Mozart's Riddle of the Sun. When the young Mozart played the cathedral organ, witnesses described a strange phenomenon. It is said that the sounds of the main organ pipes made the stained glass windows glow even on a cloudy day, and dust in the rays of light gathered into strange geometric shapes. There is a belief that Mozart found a lost note in the cathedral which resonates with the frequency of the universe itself. Some believe that this note is still recorded in the vibrations of the walls, and if you are lucky enough to be in the temple in complete silence, you can hear a quiet hum. This is the cathedral continuing its endless symphony. Survival mysticism, Island in the Fire. One of the greatest mysteries of Ulm Cathedral is its fate during World War II. In 1944, the city of Ulm was practically wiped off the face of the earth by devastating bombing. Almost all the buildings around the cathedral turned into ashes and ruins. However, the cathedral itself remained standing intact and unharmed, as if surrounded by an invisible shield. Skeptics remember March 1, 1945. Then a 500-kilogram bomb pierced the roof and fell directly into the choir hall of the cathedral, but did not explode. It only deformed the steel structures, remaining a mute witness to the miracle. Believers call it a miracle of God, historians a coincidence or a guide for pilots. But local legends tell of the Angel of Ulm, who spread his wings over the spire on that terrible night, diverting fire from the holy walls. This surviving vertical amidst the scorched earth became a symbol for the city's residents that even in the darkest times, there is something eternal that cannot be destroyed. The legend of the Ulm sparrow. You can't talk about this cathedral without mentioning a little bird. They say that when the cathedral was being built, there was a problem: how to carry huge beams through the narrow city gates. The builders were about to demolish part of the wall until they saw a sparrow building a nest. The bird was holding a straw knot across its beak, but lengthwise, which allowed it to crawl into narrow gaps. The builders understood the hint, turned the beams lengthwise, and construction continued. Since then, the Ulm sparrow has become an unofficial symbol of the city, and its figurine can be found on the roof of the cathedral as a reminder: even the smallest creature can give wise advice to great masters. The story of the Danube mermaid under the foundation. There is an old legend that while laying the foundation, the builders came across an underground lake that connects to the Danube. They say that the spirit of the river lives there, a mermaid who was angry at the construction of such a heavy structure. To prevent it from washing away the cathedral, the craftsmen supposedly walled up a silver fish in one of the columns. Locals believe that as long as the fish is in place, the Danube will not take the cathedral underground. Gaussian solar calendar. Few people know, but there are points in the cathedral through which rays fall on certain sculptures on the days of the solstice. It is said that the great mathematician Carl Friedrich Gauss used the cathedral spire as a triangulation point for his geodetic measurements. The spire was so high and accurate that it served as an ideal reference point for mapping the entire southern Germany. The legend of the stairway to heaven and the devil. There is a dark myth that when the number of steps exceeded 500, the devil tried to confuse people so that they would never reach the top. He made the stairs spiral and so narrow that a person could not turn around and could only see the wall in front of him. That is why on the last levels in the third gallery people often experience a panic attack or disorientation. They say it is the breath of the enemy in a narrow space. Modernity, the light of solidarity. Today, Ulm Cathedral continues to be not only an architectural landmark but also a moral compass. Since the end of February 2022, when a great war came to Ukrainian soil, this stone giant has spoken the language of light. Every evening, its walls are illuminated in the colors of the Ukrainian flag, blue and yellow. The square in front of the cathedral has become a place of strength for Ukrainians who, far from home, hold rallies against aggression. This is extremely symbolic. The cathedral, which withstood the fire of the past war, has today become a wall of support for those who are fighting for their freedom now. Ulm's greatness is now not only in the meters of its spire, but also in the depth of its solidarity. Stone Prayer of the Danube. Ulm Cathedral is more than sandstone and glass. It is a symbol that true greatness is not afraid of time. It can wait 500 years, it can stand in the middle of fire, it can rise above the clouds, reminding us how small we are and at the same time how powerful we are in our aspirations. It teaches us patience, to wait 500 years to stand in the middle of fire and rise above the clouds. When you stand at its foot, feeling the cold of the sandstone and the wind from the Danube, you understand, as long as this spire cuts the sky, the world has hope. This is a story about how ordinary people challenged eternity and won. As long as this spire cuts the sky, the world has hope that light will always find a way through the darkest night. This is a stone story about patience, about miracles, and that a true masterpiece is always a dialogue between man and eternity. Thanks for watching, my friend. Don't forget to watch our other videos and learn new mysteries. We have a lot more interesting things in store for you. Leave your questions and wishes in the comments. What should we tell you about next time?